Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. My name is Caleb, I'm 19, and my fingers slipped on the gym door. It clicked louder than it should have, like it betrayed me. I almost walked away, then I leaned in again. That choice still makes me feel sick. Dad's voice was low, the coach voice he saves for kids. I saw his hand land on Ethan's shoulder, firm and familiar. Ethan stood there grinning, like he owned that hallway. My throat tightened before my brain caught up. "I wish you were my son," Dad's words hit clean and sharp. No joking it, no teasing smile. Ethan's face lit up and he nodded fast. I swear my ears started ringing right then. I pulled back hard and my heels scuffed the floor. Dad's head snapped toward the doorway. I pressed flat to the wall like that helped. My heart punched so hard it felt like it moved my ribs. He took one step, then stopped like he reconsidered. His shoes didn't move again, but his silence did. I watched him through the narrow gap, barely breathing. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the door and stayed there. "You good?" Dad asked, still facing the hallway. Ethan shrugged and forced a laugh, too quick. Dad's grip tightened on Ethan's shoulder, then eased off. That little squeeze felt like a warning. I should have opened the door and owned it. That's what I tell myself now, like it's simple. Instead, I backed up slow and turned away. My palms were damp and I wiped them on my jeans. I walked toward the lockers, acting like I belonged there. My legs did that weird shaky thing like I ran stairs. I kept my head down but my ears stayed wide open. I wanted to hear them stop talking and they didn't. Their voices dropped even lower, like they were hiding money. I caught pieces, not full lines, and that was worse. The only clear thing was Ethan's laugh, smug and small. It sounded like he already won something I never got to play for. I swung my bag up and nearly missed my shoulder. A kid brushed past me and I flinched like I got slapped. I forced a normal face, then failed anyway. You know that feeling when your skin feels too tight? I told myself I misunderstood it. Maybe Dad meant like a son, the way adults say stuff. But my brain replayed the words with perfect audio. It did not sound like at all. I circled back because I'm stubborn and nosy. I crept along the wall and stopped at the corner again. Dad was still there, close enough to block Ethan's path. That body angle looked protective, not casual. Ethan lifted his phone and turned the screen away. Dad glanced at it anyway, then nodded once. Ethan's smile changed, like he got instructions. Then Dad laughed and it was soft, almost proud. That laugh messed me up more than the sentence. I had not heard that laugh aimed at me in a while. I hate writing that because it sounds needy. Still true though, and it burned. A ball bounced somewhere and the echo snapped me back. I moved before I could think, straight into the restroom. I locked myself in a stall like I was hiding from cops. My hands shook so much I dropped my phone. I stared at the screen, then at my own shoes. I tried to text my friend, then deleted everything. What do you even type after something like that? "Hey, my dad just replaced me in real time." I sat there and listened to the door open outside. Footsteps crossed the tile, slow and steady. Dad's voice floated in, closer than I wanted. My chest went tight again, like I forgot how breathing works. "Caleb," my name landed like a hook in my back. I froze so hard my legs cramped. He didn't sound angry, which made it worse. He sounded careful, like he was choosing each word. I waited, hoping he would leave first. Instead, he knocked once on the stall door. Not hard, not gentle, just exact. My stomach dropped because he was right there now. I forced my voice out and it came out thin. "Yeah, I'm here," that was all I managed. There was a pause that stretched too long. Then he exhaled and it sounded like relief. "Grab your stuff when you're ready," his tone stayed smooth. No questions, no what's wrong, nothing that helped. His footsteps backed away but not fast. That control in his walk made my skin crawl. I came out and washed my hands for no reason. The mirror showed my face and I barely recognized it. I tried a normal expression and it looked fake. Like I was wearing my own head wrong. Dad was waiting by the exit, leaning on the wall. He didn't look at his phone and that felt intentional. When I approached, he smiled like everything was fine. I wanted to smash that smile off his face. "You heading home?" He jerked his chin toward the lot. I nodded because talking felt dangerous. He started walking and I matched his pace. Our steps sounded too synced, like a performance. Halfway down the hall, Ethan appeared behind us. He didn't call out, but he stared straight at my back. I felt it, that pressure of someone watching. Then Dad glanced over his shoulder, quick and automatic. Dick. Ethan lifted 2 fingers and a tiny wave. Dad answered with the smallest nod, almost secret. I caught it and my stomach flipped over. That nod looked like a promise. When we reached the doors, Dad held one open. I passed through without thanking him, which is petty. He didn't react, which scared me more than anger. Outside, he kept that calm face like a mask. The drive started quiet, the kind that aches. I watched his hands on the wheel and tried not to stare. He hummed once, then stopped like he remembered I existed. My tongue felt thick and the question sat there anyway. "Who's Ethan to you?" I asked, and my voice cracked. Dad's grip tightened for a second, then loosened again. He didn't look at me, not even for a heartbeat. And that silence told me I was finally in trouble. I slammed my bedroom door and locked it like a coward. My phone buzzed twice and I ignored both hits. I paced until my legs started cramping. Then I grabbed my headphones and heard nothing anyway. I tried calling my friend, then I belayed mid-ring. What was I supposed to say without sounding insane? I kept picturing that hallway scene on a loop. Every replay made my teeth grind harder. A new buzz hit and I checked the screen. It was Dad, just one word, dinner. No question mark, no softness, just a command. My thumb hovered, then I left it unread. I went downstairs because avoiding him felt worse. Dad was already at the table, acting ordinary. He didn't look up right away, which felt planned. When he finally did, his eyes searched my face like a scanner. "You okay?" His voice stayed light, too polished. I nodded and sat, then pushed food around. My hands kept twitching like they wanted to spill something. He watched that, then looked away fast. He started talking about schedules and chores. I answered with single words, then forced a fake laugh. It sounded wrong and he heard it. His jaw tightened for a second, then smoothed out again. His phone lit up on the table, screen facing down. He flipped it over quick like it was hot. That move was new and it hit me hard. I stared at his pocket like it might confess for him. Another buzz came and he stood too fast. "I'll be right back," he pointed at nothing and walked off. I heard the hallway door shut with a careful click. The quiet after that felt loaded. I shouldn't have followed, but I did. I moved light like I was stealing my own life back. Dad's voice came through the doorway, low and urgent. Then I heard a woman's laugh and my skin went cold. "I'm trying," his words came out clipped and tense. A pause, then a softer line I couldn't catch. My brain filled the gap with the worst options. I pressed closer and my shoulder brushed the frame. The call ended fast, like he noticed the sound. He stepped out and almost ran into me. His eyes snapped to my face, then down to my feet. "Need something?" He held the question like a trap. I forced a shrug and lied with my whole body. "Forgot my charger." My voice sounded flat and wrong. He nodded like he believed me, but he didn't move. He waited there, blocking the hall like a wall. I squeezed past him and grabbed a random cord. My hands shook so much I almost dropped it. He watched my fingers like they were evidence. Then he stepped aside, slow, like he was letting me go on purpose. Back at the table, his phone stayed hidden. He started asking me about classes again, too casual. I answered, then stopped halfway through a sentence. He didn't push, and that scared me more than yelling. A few minutes later, his pocket buzzed again. He pulled the phone out, tilted it away from me. His mouth twitched like he wanted to smile. Then he swallowed it and stood up again. "I need to run an errand." He grabbed his keys. It was late, and we both knew that was weird. I waited for him to add details, but he didn't. He just looked at me like he expected permission. "You're going now?" My voice came out sharper than planned. He paused at the door, hand on the knob. "Yeah," one syllable, then he opened it. That was it, like I didn't get a vote. I moved before I could chicken out. I slipped on my shoes and followed him outside. He glanced back once and his face went blank. "You're coming?" The question sounded like a warning. Fresh air. I kept walking, pretending I owned it. He stared at me for a beat, then turned away. He didn't tell me to stop, which felt like a test. So I got in the car and my pulse went crazy. He drove without music, without small talk. His eyes stayed forward and his hands stayed steady. Mine didn't, and I kept shoving them under my legs. Every red light felt like a chance to explode. We pulled into a parking lot near the field complex. Not the gym, not home, not anywhere normal for errands. He parked in the far corner, away from everyone. My stomach twisted because he chose isolation. Wait here, his voice cut clean, no room for debate. I watched him step out and shut the door gently. That gentle shut felt rehearsed, like he was hiding noise. Then he walked toward a dark SUV I didn't recognize. A door opened on that SUV and someone got out. A woman, hair pulled back, arms crossed tight. Dad stopped close to her, too close for comfort. They spoke fast and I couldn't hear the words. Then Ethan appeared from the passenger side. He moved like he belonged in that scene. He nodded at Dad like they had a routine. My throat went tight because the pieces started lining up. I leaned forward and cracked my window an inch. Cold air hit my face and it kept me awake. I heard my name carried on the wind. Dad was talking about me right there. The woman snapped her head toward our car. Dad turned too, eyes narrowing like he caught a shadow. I ducked back and held my breath like a kid. My own fear made me feel pathetic. The car door handle clicked and my whole body jolted. It wasn't my door, it was Dad's door unlocking. He wasn't walking back slow anymore. He was coming straight at me and he looked done. His knuckles hit my window, slow and measured. I looked up and kept my face blank on purpose. He pointed down, 2 fingers like an order. I cracked the window wider and the night got sharper. Get out, he didn't raise his voice, which felt worse. I stared at him like I forgot how legs work. His eyes flicked to the SUV, then back to me. That quick glance told me this was not just about me. I stepped out and kept the door open like a shield. He moved closer and lowered his chin, all control. Why are you here? His words came neat and calm. I wanted to yell, but my throat locked anyway. You dragged me here. I hated how small it sounded. He exhaled through his nose and looked past me again. The woman near the SUV crossed her arms tighter. Ethan shifted his weight like he was bored of us. Dad leaned in, close enough to make it personal. This is not your business. His mouth barely moved. That line hit me like a slap because it was my life. I held his stare and waited for him to blink first. Then why are you hiding it? I gestured at the SUV. He didn't answer me, he scanned the lot again. His hand landed on my shoulder, heavy but friendly. He steered me toward our car like I was a problem to store. I planted my feet and refused to move. He tightened his grip for 1 second, then eased up. That tiny adjustment felt like a warning in code. He smiled like a stranger and nodded toward the passenger door. Get in, 2 words, 0 warmth. I hesitated just long enough to make him angry. His eyes flashed, then he smothered it fast. He wanted witnesses to see a calm parent, not the truth. I slid into the seat and shut the door hard. He walked around and climbed in like nothing happened. No apology, no explanation, just a steady breath. The engine started, and I felt trapped again. He pulled out smooth and drove with both hands placed. You're going to stop following me, he said flat. I laughed once and it came out ugly. You're going to stop lying, I shot back, then regretted it. His head turned a fraction, just enough to sting. Watch your tone, his voice went colder than the air. I stared out the window and bit my tongue. I could feel my pulse in my jaw. We drove in silence for a minute, then he changed tactics. I'm dealing with something complicated, he kept his eyes forward. That complicated sounded like a cover, not a reason. I waited for details and he offered none. You keep acting like I'm stupid, I said. He didn't deny it, which told me everything. His fingers tapped the wheel once, then stopped. That stop felt like a decision being made. Here's what you need to know, he finally looked at me. His voice stayed even, but his eyes weren't. You didn't hear anything tonight, he paused like that was generous. My stomach turned because he wasn't asking. I leaned toward him and kept my voice low. I heard enough, that was true and also not enough. His jaw flexed, then he forced a thin smile. You think you know what's going on, he asked, baiting me. I almost took the bait and I hate that. I wanted to list every detail like evidence in court. Instead I said, explain Ethan, and I kept it simple. His face stayed blank and that blank felt practiced. He pulled into our driveway and cut the engine. The quiet inside the car felt like a locked room. He turned to me and held eye contact longer. You don't get to make this harder, he said like I was the villain. I got out without replying because I was shaking inside. He followed me to the door, staying half a step behind. It felt like a guard escorting a prisoner, not a dad. When we stepped inside, he spoke again, soft and sharp. Go to bed, his hand lifted, palm out like a stop sign. I stared at his hand and felt something snap. I'm not a kid, I said, and my voice cracked. He didn't flinch, which made me feel smaller. He moved C. Loser and lowered his voice. You will not talk about this to anyone. He let the sentence hang there, heavy and final. I nodded because I didn't trust myself to speak. Upstairs, I shut my door and pressed my back against it. My brain sprinted in circles, looking for a clean answer. You ever get stuck between rage and fear like that? I slid down to the floor and listened for his footsteps. The next day he acted normal again, too normal. Coffee keys, a quick see you later, like we were fine. That fake routine made me want to throw something. Instead, I kept my face still and watched him leave. I skipped class and drove to the field complex alone. Yeah, I know that was reckless. I needed eyes on Ethan, not more guesses. The risk felt worth it, which says a lot about my state. I spotted Ethan near the benches with two teammates. He laughed loud and looked around like he owned the place. When he saw me, his smile didn't reach his eyes. He broke away and walked toward me like he planned it. You stalking now? He tilted his head, smug. I stepped closer and kept my hands out of pockets. Cut the act, I said, and my voice surprised me. He glanced over my shoulder, checking who could hear. He leaned in just enough to be rude. You really don't know, do you? My chest tightened and I hated that he noticed. He smiled like my confusion tasted good. I grabbed his sleeve and pulled him aside. He didn't fight it, which felt wrong. His eyes flicked to my hand, then back to my face. Careful, he whispered like he was giving advice. Tell me what you are to him, I snapped. Ethan's grin faded for a second, then returned. You'll find out soon, he said and shrugged. Then he walked away like he dropped a bomb and left me holding it. Practice started and Dad showed up halfway through. He didn't look at me when he arrived, not once. He headed straight for the coaches, then angled toward Ethan. That path felt like a choice being repeated. I watched him talk to Ethan with that smooth patience. Ethan nodded like they shared a script. Dad's hand tapped Ethan's shoulder twice like a signal. I stood there and felt heat crawl up my neck. When the drill ended, Dad approached me finally. He kept a neutral face like a referee. After this we talk, he said, quiet. Not a question, not a request, an order again. I wanted to refuse just to prove I could. But I also wanted answers more than pride. So I nodded and he gave a small approving tilt. That tiny approval made me feel sick. After practice, he led me behind the equipment shed. No one else around, no accidental ears. He crossed his arms and waited for me to speak first. I realized he thought he still controlled the pace. I'm not dropping this, I said. He stared at me like I was stubborn on purpose. You're making it worse, he replied, calm and clipped. I laughed again and it sounded bitter. Worse for who? I asked. His eyes shifted away for a moment, just a moment. That was the first crack I'd seen in him. Then he looked back and put the mask on tighter. Ethan has been through enough, he said. No details, no timeline, just a line meant to guilt me. I swallowed hard because it almost worked. Then I remembered his voice in the gym, and I pushed back. So have I said, and my hands trembled. He softened his face like he was trying a different tool. I care about you, he said like it was a fix. But he still wouldn't answer the one question that mattered. He stepped closer and lowered his voice again. This ends if you let it end, he said. That sounded like a threat wrapped in logic. I stared at him and wondered what he would do if I didn't. A car door slammed somewhere and Dad flinched. He glanced toward the lot and tightened his mouth. For the first time, he looked scared of being seen with me. That detail stayed with me, sharp as a bruise. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it up like proof, then turned it away. Stop digging, he said, and his voice finally cracked. That crack told me I was close to something he could not manage. I didn't back down because I couldn't. Why did you say it like that? I asked, steady. He stared at the ground for a beat, then looked up. His answer came out quiet, and it landed like a punch. Because I meant it, he said. Then he walked away before I could move. I stood there behind the shed, alone and shaking. And I knew this was going to blow up soon. I yanked open his desk drawer the second the house went quiet. My hands moved fast like they had their own brain. I knew I was crossing a line, and I crossed it anyway. You ever do something wrong and still feel entitled? A folder sat under a stack of papers, and it wasn't subtle. No label, no mess, just placed like he wanted it reachable. I slid it out and flipped it open with one hard breath. My fingers landed on a sealed envelope and froze. I tore it open and immediately hated myself. A clinic logo stared back at me, clean and official. There were names on it, and one of them wasn't mine. My stomach tightened so hard I had to swallow twice. Ethan's name was printed like it belonged there. Dad's name sat near it, like an answer nobody asked for. I stared until the letters started blurring. Then I read it again slower, like pain would change spelling. I looked for a date and I found one. Not old enough to be history, not new enough to be nothing. My brain tried to do math and kept tripping. I felt dumb and furious at the same time. I heard a floorboard creak and snapped the folder shut. I shoved everything back like speed could erase guilt. My pulse pounded in my throat, loud and stupid. The creak came again, closer. I turned and saw him in the doorway, still dressed. He didn't look shocked, which was its own kind of terror. His gaze went to the drawer, then to my face. He already knew, and that hit harder than any yelling. "What are you doing?" His voice stayed low, controlled. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. My fingers flexed like they wanted to grab something. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He walked to the desk and didn't rush. That slow pace felt like punishment with manners. He put his hand on the drawer handle, then stopped. He watched my eyes like he was timing my lies. "I needed proof," I blurted, and hated how desperate it sounded. His face tightened, then softened into something fake. "Proof of what?" He kept it calm like a teacher. I knew he was baiting me, and I bit anyway. "Of you picking him," the words came out rough. He stared for a beat, then inhaled through his nose. "That's not what this is," he said, too quick. Then he reached past me and slid the drawer open. He pulled out the folder and held it against his chest. Like it was his, like I hadn't just touched it. He didn't check the contents, he checked me. "Did you read everything?" he asked, and his eyes sharpened. I tried to act tough and failed. "I read enough," my voice cracked on the last word. He nodded once like he expected that answer. Then he walked to the trash can and dropped the torn envelope inside. That move felt calculated, like cleanup in front of a witness. I watched the paper fall and felt my face heat up. He wasn't hiding the mess now, he was managing it. My hands curled into fists and I forced them open. "You're not going to yell?" I asked, and I hated myself. He leaned back against the desk and crossed his arms. "Would that help you?" His tone stayed smooth, almost gentle. It sounded like care, but it landed like control. He took his phone out and unlocked it right there. He didn't angle it away this time, which felt wrong. He tapped a thread, then stopped like he reconsidered. He locked the screen again, and the tease made me shake. "You're playing games," I said, and my voice rose. He lifted one hand, palm down, telling me to lower it. "You want answers," he replied, and his eyes stayed steady. "Then stop doing reckless things," he added like he owned the rules. Reckless, that word made me laugh, sharp and bitter. He looked at me like my laugh embarrassed him. I wanted to ask if Ethan laughed like that too. Instead, I stared at the folder pressed to his chest. "I'm not letting this slide," I said, and my jaw hurt. He didn't react, and that silence felt practiced. Then he nodded toward my bed, like he was guiding traffic. "Sit," he ordered, and I hated that I listened. I sat on the edge, hands gripping my knees. He stayed standing, which kept him taller on purpose. He didn't lecture, which was almost worse. He just watched me like he was waiting for me to fold. "You're terrified," he said, quiet and flat. I wanted to deny it, but my body betrayed me. My knee bounced and my throat kept tightening. He noticed every small thing and stored it away. "You told him you wished he was your son," I snapped. He flinched just a flicker, then covered it fast. He looked down at the folder, then back at me. "That was a mistake," he said, and it didn't sound like regret. "A mistake?" I leaned forward, heat in my face. He raised his eyebrows like I was being dramatic. "You heard one sentence," he replied, and his tone turned sharp. It was the first time he sounded mad, and it felt earned. "One sentence can ruin someone," I shot back. He stared like he wanted to argue, then stopped himself. That pause was new and it scared me. He was choosing restraint not because he cared but because he had to. He walked to the window and peeked out quick. Then he came back and locked my door from the inside. That click made my stomach twist again. "Are you serious?" I asked, and my voice went thin. "I don't need anyone hearing this," he said, steady. He sat in my desk chair like he belonged there. My chair, my space, taken without asking. It felt like he was claiming territory. He placed the folder on my desk, and kept a hand on it. Like if he let go, the truth would run. "You're going to stay calm," he told me. I stared at his hand and imagined slapping it away. "Don't tell me how to feel," I snapped. He nodded once like he expected defiance. "I'm not telling you how to feel," he replied. "I'm telling you what you're going to do," he added, and his eyes hardened. That line made my chest go tight again. I stood up and the chair scraped behind my legs. He didn't move, but his gaze followed me. I realized he wasn't scared of me at all. "I'm telling Mom," I bluffed, and my voice shook. He blinked slow, then leaned forward a fraction. "You won't," he said like he knew my limits. And I hated that he was probably right. "You don't get to decide that," I tried again. He lifted the folder slightly, just an inch. "You want her hurt," his voice softened, weaponized. My stomach dropped because he found the weak spot. I froze and he saw it immediately. He set the folder down and kept talking steady. "There are consequences," he said, and he didn't explain. The lack of details was the point, and it worked. I swallowed hard and tried a different angle. "Why is your name on that?" I tapped the folder. He didn't answer, he studied my face like a test. Then he tilted his head like he was disappointed in me. "You're not thinking straight," he said. I laughed again and it came out raw. "You made me like this," I fired back. He finally looked away, like that one landed. His phone buzzed in his pocket and he went still. He didn't pull it out, he didn't glance down. He just listened to the vibration stop. That tiny moment told me someone else had power over him too. "Is that her?" I asked, and my voice went quiet. His eyes snapped back to mine, sharp. "Stop asking names," he warned, and the room tightened. I felt the line closing in around me. He stood up fast, chair rolling back. He grabbed the folder and slid it under his arm. "I'm going to fix this," he said like he was announcing a plan. I stared at him and realized I wasn't in that plan. "I'm not your problem to manage," I said. He paused at the door and turned halfway. "You're exactly my problem," he replied, cold and curt. Then he unlocked the door and stepped out. He left my door open on purpose. Like he wanted me to feel watched without seeing him. I stood there breathing hard, trying not to break. Then I heard his phone start buzzing again, and he answered it downstairs. His voice dropped low and I couldn't hear words. But I heard tone and I knew that tone now. It was the same careful control he used on Ethan. That realization made my hands start shaking again. I moved to the stairs and crept down 2 steps. The hallway light made it easy to stay hidden. He stood by the kitchen, facing away from me. He was nodding like he was agreeing to terms. "I can't do it tonight," he muttered into the phone. A pause, then a quiet, "I know." His shoulders tensed like someone was pushing back. Then he added, "He found the paperwork," and my stomach dropped. He stopped mid-sentence and turned his head. Not fully, just enough to listen for me. I backed up and tried to move silent. A stair squeaked anyway, because of course it did. His head snapped toward the stairs and my blood ran cold. He ended the call with one hard tap. Then he started walking toward me, slow and deliberate. I stood there frozen, because running would have looked guilty. When he reached the bottom step, he didn't yell. He didn't even look surprised anymore. He just stared up at me like I was a mess he owned. "Pack a bag," he said, quiet, "we're going to talk to them." I threw clothes into a bag with shaking hands. He stood in my doorway and watched, silent. Every time I paused, his eyes narrowed like a timer. I wanted to smash something, but I zipped the bag instead. We drove fast and spoke almost nothing. His phone stayed in his lap, screen dark. He kept glancing at it like it could bite. I kept staring at his hands, waiting for them to slip. We pulled into that same lot and my gut dropped. The SUV was already there, engine running. Dad parked beside it like this was scheduled. Then he looked at me and finally used a softer voice. "Stay close," he said, and opened his door. I got out and kept my bag on my shoulder. He walked ahead like a guide, not a parent. I followed because pride felt useless now. The SUV door opened, and the woman stepped out first. Her face was tight, jaw locked like she practiced it. Ethan followed behind her, hands in his pockets. He looked at me and smirked like we were equals. Dad raised one hand, palm out, asking for calm. The woman ignored it and moved closer anyway. You brought him, her voice carried sharp anger. Dad nodded once, and that nod made her eyes flash. I didn't have a choice, he replied, clipped. She laughed once, bitter and short. Ethan shifted beside her and stared at my bag. I felt judged before anyone spoke my name. The woman pointed at the bag like it proved something. He's moving in now, the question came out like a dare. Dad tensed, then shook his head. Not like that, he said, and the way he said it sounded weak. I stepped forward because I was done being background. Why is his name on your paperwork? I asked, steady. The woman's eyes widened, then narrowed fast. Ethan's smirk slipped for the first time. Dad turned toward me and kept his voice low. Not now, he warns, like that ever worked. I stared at him and felt my face heat up. Now is the only time, I snapped, and my voice shook anyway. The woman looked at Dad like she wanted to swing. You told him, her words came out slow, dangerous. Dad didn't answer her, which answered her. Ethan exhaled hard and looked away, like he hated this scene. Dad stepped between us and kept his shoulders squared. I'm trying to handle it, he said. The woman took a step closer, not backing down. You've been handling it for years, she fired back, eyes wet and furious. That line landed like a punch I didn't take. I wanted to ask what years meant, but I swallowed it. I watched Dad's face tighten, then crack a little. He looked older in that moment, and it made me angrier. Ethan walked around Dad, straight toward me. He stopped close enough to invade space on purpose. This is why he didn't tell you, he muttered. I wanted to grab his shirt, but I forced my hand still. Dad snapped loud enough to cut the air. Back up, his eyes locked on Ethan hard. Ethan lifted his hands and took one step back. That quick obedience made my stomach twist. The woman stared at Dad like she couldn't believe him. So you'll bark at him, but you won't tell your son. Her voice cracked on son, and my chest tightened. Dad's face went pale and my brain stalled. I looked at Ethan, then back at Dad. My mouth opened and nothing came out. You know that moment when reality shifts under you? It felt like that, and my knees almost buckled. Dad didn't deny it, not even once. He just stared at the ground like it could save him. Ethan watched me with a flat expression now. He wasn't smug anymore, he was waiting for impact. Say it, I forced out, voice thin. Dad lifted his head and met my eyes. His stare was raw for once, not controlled. Then he nodded, small and brutal. My skin went cold, then hot, then numb. I laughed once and it sounded broken. Okay, I said, and I didn't even know what I meant. The woman flinched like she expected me to swing. Dad stepped toward me, slow and careful. I never wanted you to find out like this. I backed away before he could reach me. That move hurt him, and I hated that it didn't satisfy me. Ethan spoke up, voice tight, almost defensive. I didn't ask for this either. I turned on him so fast my neck hurt. Then why did you look happy? I shot back and my eyes stung. Ethan's jaw clenched, and he glanced at his mom. She stared at him like she wanted him quiet. He swallowed and looked at me again, softer now. Because he finally showed up, he said, and that honesty made me dizzy. Dad's hands lifted, palms open, trying to look harmless. I'm here now, he said, like that fixed the past. The woman let out a harsh breath and shook her head. You're here when it suits you, she snapped, and I felt caught in the crossfire. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once. Instead, I asked the one that burned the most. In the gym, you meant it, my voice barely worked. Dad didn't look away this time, and that terrified me. Yes, he said, and his voice broke on it. I meant it in that moment. I stared at him and felt something in me split. Because that moment had a winner, and it wasn't me. The woman took a step back and rubbed her forehead. Ethan stayed still, eyes on the ground. Dad looked between us like he was measuring damage. I gripped my bag strap until my fingers hurt. So what now? I asked, and my voice went flat. Dad inhaled and tried to steady himself. We figure this out together, he said like a slogan. I almost laughed again, but it stuck in my throat. The woman shook her head, then pointed at Dad. No more secrets, she warned, voice shaking. Dad nodded too fast, eager like a kid caught stealing. That eagerness made me want to scream. Ethan finally looked at me, and his eyes were tired. I don't want to take anything from you, he muttered. I stared at him and felt my hands tremble. You already did, I said, and I hated how true it felt. Dad stepped closer again, risking it. I love you, he said, voice low and urgent. I flinched like the words were thrown at me. Because love without honesty feels like a trick. I lifted my bag and slung it higher on my shoulder. Dad's eyes dropped to it and his mouth opened. I cut him off with one hard look. Don't tell me to stay, I said, and my voice finally steadied. He reached out anyway, then stopped. Himself. That hesitation was the most honest thing I'd seen. The woman watched us like she couldn't breathe. Ethan stared at my shoes like he was ashamed. I turned and walked toward our car without looking back. Dad followed a few steps, then froze. I heard him whisper my name once, soft and wrecked. I kept walking because if I stopped I'd fall apart. I got in and shut the door, hands shaking again. The engine started, and I didn't even remember turning the key. In the mirror, Dad stood still beside the SUV. And I realized I wasn't leaving him behind, I was leaving who I thought he was.